when we started digging in, we realized, oh no, there are people who their sanctuaries and do tours, but nobody's doing the educational piece in the way that it really needed to be done. You don't read from a script. You don't memorize a tour. You sit down on the ground with the pigs in the dirt, and you help those people fall in love with those animals.
As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We've got some really exciting things going on these days. But first, as you can see, we've started posting video episodes of the Vegan Posse on YouTube. So please make sure to subscribe there and also on Spotify. The show will, of course, also be available in podcast form on all your favorite podcast platforms. So the Vegan Posse Self-Love series is almost here. That will be a week-long daily series of episodes dedicated to expanding our tenderness, affection, curiosity, and sheer delight in one very important animal, ourselves. And for a preparatory jolt of self-love, make sure to check out my novel, Marrying Myself, the vegan anti-romance romance featured in Veg News magazine as a top media pick of the year. Last but not least, come to Vegan Summerfest. It's a great conference happening in Johnstown, Pennsylvania in July, specifically from July 10th to 14th. I'll be speaking there, and so will my friends Jen Hawk and zillions of other amazing people. And we'll all be stuffing our faces with the incredible vegan food prepared by a previous guest on the podcast, Chef Mark Reinfeld. As for today's episode, I'm thrilled to introduce Cathy Stevens, founder of Catskill Animal Sanctuary in New York State. A lot of us vegans fantasize about starting an animal sanctuary, but not many of us ever actually do it. But Cathy did. It was fascinating to hear about what it's like operating a sanctuary on a daily basis, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have plenty of info in the show notes about how you can support Catskill Animal Sanctuary or even go visit. So enjoy this conversation with Cathy Stevens. Cathy, welcome to the Vegan Posse. Are you ready for the ride of your life?
Ready for it, Chrissy. Happy to be with you guys.
Wonderful. So you're the founder of the incredibly lovely Catskill Animal Sanctuary, which I had the chance to visit when I lived in New York City. And I want to hear all about the sanctuary, but first I'd like to take it way back to when you were a kid. So where did you grow up, and did you think much about the animals in our food system?
Well, I grew up on a farm.
So
Virginia.
I was guessing you did. Yeah.
But I grew up in Virginia, but it was a horse farm. It was a thoroughbred breeding and training farm that my dad started. And we had a couple beef cows. I had a little goat that I brought in the house. We had a donkey named Linda. So it wasn't just the horses, but I've had animals had they been part of my DNA my whole life, but I did not question the food system. Not only did I not question the food system, my dad would make jokes that we were eating George tonight or Ed, and didn't question it.
Right. That makes sense. And actually, I was sharing on during an interview just the other day that several of the guests who've been on my podcast also grew up on farms, and they were served their, pet animals for dinner. Two of them. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. One a hen and one a little lamb. So
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't, it wasn't a joke. That's for sure. So how did you come to find the vegan path?
um, I have always been relatively health conscious. When I was a kid in the 70s, we didn't question that idea of needing your protein to be meat, right? There was no conversation about it and little awareness, certainly not in rural Virginia. But as I moved north to go to grad school and just became more interested in, because I don't have been active and thought I was eating healthily, and then just became interested in learning more about my diet from a health perspective. So in my 20s, eliminated everything but fish and every meat but fish, not dairy. Um, and it was, right around the time that I started CAS that I started watching documentaries and was exposed to the whole truth. And that was it. But that was, I was 40. So took a bit.
Yeah, I relate. It took me it took me a little bit too, for sure. So that's so interesting. So you initially came into this world from a health perspective, but in the meantime, you had this deep affection and just caring nature for non-human animals. So
Oh,
isn't it?
absolutely. Like when you
Yeah.
grew up like that, you have the opportunity to know that there's so much more than most people who aren't exposed have the opportunity to experience. Like we know that our dogs and cats have every emotion we do. We know that. We don't know that about the animals.
Right.
But let me tell you about a pig tapping attack from good lords.
Yeah, I imagine they throw some good ones. I've never been witness.
Dinner time. They climb the thing. Dinner time. Rah, 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 rah. They sound like bears.
Wow. Very, very
Yeah.
interesting. So you founded Catskill Animal Sanctuary in 2001, which was over 20 years ago. And what was going on for you at that time in your life?
I was I had been a high school English teacher and I was invited to become the principal of a new high school that was opening in Boston. And as I often say, had it been a school for social justice, it was a charter school. Had it been a school for social justice or even for the arts and humanities, I would probably still be there today. But it was a school, it was a media and technology school. And my standard line, Chrissy, is that I can't wait to throw away all these devices and climb a tree and eat mangoes. But I think technology is not my friend. I had a podcast, I had all those things that you're using now, and I use it because it serves my work, but I don't have an affinity for it that I'm not particularly good at it. So I turned down the job, and it felt like this pivotal moment um of recognizing, like, wow, I thought I was on this trajectory. I thought that I would do my little part to impact the world through the public school system. But if that's not going to happen, then what do I want to do for the next 25, 30, 35 years? And so I took a little time off for the first time in my life. And I just took lots and long walks with my dog and talked to my family and friends. And what it came to me eventually is that I wanted to combine my love for teaching and learning with my love for animals And so CAS became from day one a true teaching sanctuary.
Beautiful, beautiful. And had you already gone vegan at that point?
I was vegetarian. I was vegetarian. I was not vegan, but it was
Interesting.
kind of
Yeah.
months later that within a few months.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it always astounds me that, even for people like us who really care, and we often really care for a long time, often our whole lives, and even for people like us, it often takes a long time, if ever, for, the full reality to sink in that no, just not participating in animal exploitation means eating vegan.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no way around that. And I don't know if we've ever discussed this in the couple of times that we've met, but our paths overlapped somewhat in that I lived in Boston for a long time. That's where my novel, Marrying Myself, featuring a vegan protagonist, is set. And I was a public school substitute teacher in Boston Public Schools. And
Interesting. Where
yeah,
did
in
you live?
Roxbury and Jamaica Plain.
I lived in Jamaica Plain.
You did.
I
I lived,
did
so
for
I
10
lived in the
years.
back. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Jamaica Plain is great. I worked for a nonprofit there for a couple of years.
What was the name of
Um,
it?
it was, I'd rather not say.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather not say. But yeah, but working for the public schools as a sub, I did that. I had a couple of rounds, and it was definitely no walk in the park. Boston Public Schools. Boy, that was a wake up call as to what kids are dealing with. But
Yeah.
I did really find it. I really found it very interesting. Just to, I hadn't connected with youth of that age. I was in a middle school in Jamaica Plain. The first time I ended up being a regular sub there, and then the second go round I was a high school substitute teacher at Madison Park Technical Vocational High School.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
They lost there? Is that in
in
Roxbury?
Roxbury.
Yeah.
Yep, 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 yeah. So you came to this awakening and decided, okay, we're going to combine these interests. So where did you even go from there?
Well, where my partner Jesse at the time, my partner Jesse and I, he was an actor, and so he, as actors often do, actor and musician, you work crazily and then you have blocks of time. And then you work crazily and you have blocks of time. So he decided he would do this with me. And we traveled, spent a bit of time traveling to sanctuaries to find out what it was going to try to get a sense of what it was going to be like. And there weren't that many back then, but there were enough. And we visited several good ones. We visited the wonderful, oh my goodness, Poplar Spring in very, 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 very southern Maryland. Amazing, incredible sanctuary. And then we saw some that really should have been shut down. So but it was eye-opening. And so we came back armed with, the information we gleaned from 8 or 10 sanctuary founders. We held a public meeting, and because, sorry, I forgot this detail, we had moved to, had a little teeny little place in like a little teeny weekend place. It would have been called a tiny house back then, practically small weekend place, in upstate New York. And so we were spending more and more of our time there. And we held a public meeting, and it was packed. And we said, this is what we want to do. And here's our vision, here's our mission, and what we need is A, B, C, D, and E. And what we needed was land. And at that meeting, a woman stood up and said, "I've got 50 acres that I'm not using. I would be I would entertain having you get started there." Well, she was about 400 feet down the road from our little weekend house. She just had this beautiful little small farm. And so we got, it was great because we got set up there. We didn't have to build anything. And while we got all our legal ducks in a row, built our board, etc., um, we were able to have the benefit of this place we didn't have to pay for. And in that process, during that time, we started fundraising for a property and looking around for a property. And, we were very young. We were just in our infancy. And property up here was a quinzillion dollars an acre, right? But we got a call one day from a guy who had become a CAS member. We probably at the time had, I don't know, 11 members or something. And he said, "I know of a property. It's in pretty rough shape, but you might want to take a look." Rough shape. Like, I described it in the first chapter of my first book. Like, rough shape is maybe the understatement of the century. It was an abandoned horse farm. Interesting. Racehorse farm, but standard bred. I grew up on a thoroughbred farm. And it was about to be taken for back taxes. It was about to be taken by the county for back taxes. And it had been, the guy hadn't used it as a horse farm for some years. And it had mountains of tires and an open septic and rusted vehicles in what was supposed to be the parking lot. And the fencing had collapsed and the shelters had collapsed. But we got 80 acres in the Hudson Valley for $300,000, which is dirt cheap. Dirt cheap. And since then, over the years, we've added one property at a time, so that now we have seven property.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, so the place, they're all connected.
They're all connected.
Okay. Okay.
But the 7 properties make up our 158.
Wow. And so your partner Jesse, he was on board. He was a fan of this idea.
He was for a while. He didn't last that long. I mean, I don't know if I would say that the sanctuary ended our relationship, but I think it probably did. And that's okay. Like, he moved to he's a good man, and he moved to Louisiana to pursue music. And it was just, he's a city boy. He didn't realize what he was getting into. I did. Like, I knew what it was like. Like,
Is he a vegan? Was he a vegan?
He was, yeah.
And is he still?
I don't know. We're not in touch.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds rough. I mean, that's a lot. You're launching this whole new endeavor, and then obviously relationship issues just happen when they happen. Wow.
Yeah, that's true. It happened when they happened. Yeah.
So what was your plan? Did you have any idea in mind as to what sorts of animals you were hoping to take in, 100%. Or what you expected?
100%. Like, when we started doing the research, we thought, well, there's an abundance of dog and cat children, and there's an abundance of horse sanctuary, but there were very few for farm animals. And not only were there very few for farmed animals, but when we started digging in, we realized, oh no, there are people who, their sanctuaries and do tours, but nobody's doing the educational piece I didn't think in the way that it really needed to be done. You don't read from a script. You don't memorize a tour. You sit down on the ground with the pigs in the dirt, and you help those people fall in love with those animals. It's the tours we experienced at other sanctuaries were all very, very fact based. And so we changed the model. We share plenty of facts about the impact on health, on the environment, and what the animals go through. But there are tours where we get the people literally meet 8 animals because they're lying in the grass with the cows for 15 minutes and having the cows bathe their faces, like just licks them. So, because what we found over the years, 100,000%, is that the animals are our best vegan makers. I can talk till I'm blue in the face.
Yeah.
It's just talk, unless people understand, unless people have the opportunity to see that this sheep is running over to me and burying his head in my legs to say hello. Or this turkey has just fallen asleep in my lap. Or this pig has run over because I called her name, Amelia, right? Unless you provide the opportunity for people to see that they're as individual as our dogs and cats, and that they had the same emotions that our dogs and cats do, and that we do, then you're missing the point. You're missing the opportunity. And so we set up as at the beginning as a teaching sanctuary, and then over the years we just expanded. We had a vegan cooking program for years. We had a camp for kids for 7 or 8 years. We've moved into the sort of virtual space, and we're now partnering we deliver virtual programming to schools all over the country, and we're now partnering in New York City with the mayor's office of food policy.
And for people who aren't aware, Mayor Eric Adams is a vegan, or at least he eats whole food, plant-based, is my understanding. Is that what brought you together?
What brought us together, is that we knew there was a mayor's office of food policy. We knew the woman who ran it, and we reached out, and she said, "Would you be our partner?" And so now we have this rather daunting opportunity deliver programming that's aligned with state educational standards. It's not fluff, it's really education while you're sitting in the field being licked by the cow. To every single school in the 5 boroughs.
Amazing. That's amazing. And what age are the kids?
Any teacher
any
can sign up
age.
in classrooms, so it's K through 12.
What is the class? Like, what realm does
It's
it
not
fall
a
within?
class. So our programs meet, every state has educational standards, right?
Yeah.
Our programs meet life science standards, they meet health and
Okay.
nutrition standards, and they meet humane education standards. So
Wow.
we've been in a lot of science classes, but lots of other classes too. And then we've also been, because humane education is a requirement in New York State. So
What does humane education even mean?
I think it means it's just very, very basically making kids more aware of the fact that animals are here with us and should be treated with kindness and respect.
Really? So it focuses on animals?
Yeah, it does.
Interesting. Okay. That's very interesting. I had no idea that there was a whole subject in public schools called
It's
humane
not a
education.
subject. It's not a subject. Each teachers are required to offer some number of hours of humane education.
Okay. Okay. And so so what do the classes look like, the virtual programs?
Well, they're hilarious. I mean, from my vantage point, when you've got 35-year-olds who've never seen a cow and who say things like, "Why doesn't that cow have pants?" Like, it's often hilarious, right? But then you've got we last week our director of human ed was saying that one day with 439 students, it was one class after another, after another, after another, and she was talking in particular about how sophisticated the fifth graders were, very aware of industrial farming, asking lots of really smart questions. So it varies on the age of the kids, on what they've been exposed to, on what the teacher asks for. If the teacher wants a nutrition lesson, we'll offer that.
Wow, really? And how does that tend to go over? Because I imagine very few, if any, of these teachers are vegan or vegetarian or, eat in a way beyond the standard American diet.
Right. But a lot of it is, I would say most of them are probably freaked out about climate change. So often climate change is the way in.
Got it.
Yeah. But I mean, they've been very receptive. It's spreading word of mouth, and really quickly, to the point where we're kind of a little overwhelmed. And we'll see how it goes. We need to get funding for it because we don't charge the schools. It's a free program. So we're actively looking for funding for the program, but in terms of the curriculum and the delivery, there's quite a demand.
That's amazing that you're offering this program free of charge to the schools. Wow.
New York City schools, they don't have money.
Yeah.
All schools don't have money.
Yeah, but you guys don't either.
We don't either. Right. Right.
Wow.
But there are funders out there. We hope to be connecting with a funder soon, and we think we'll really be excited by this program.
So tell me this, during these classes, do kids put it together that, they're seeing this cow who just has a personality and has, awareness and consciousness, that might impact their food choices? Do kids ever put that together, or do you
We
ever?
yes. I mean, that's the whole
Okay,
point,
okay.
right?
Yeah, how explicit are you, I guess, is what I was wondering.
Totally age appropriate.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Our youth programs manager, Lauren, has been doing this for 7 years, and she's very skilled at, delivering a message appropriately to a 5-year-old, and then a slightly different one to an 8-year-old, and then a very different one to a 12-year-old, and an even different one to a 17-year-old.
Right, right. And the kids get that, okay, these same animals, these adorable, sweet, funny animals with all this personality are the same source of what's being served to them.
Oh, yeah.
At their school lunch. Yeah. How do they talk about it? Do you hear them, make that connection in a way that's going to affect their daily life?
I have only listened to a few programs. We just piloted this program in March, and it has taken off. So I don't know firsthand, but what the feedback I'm getting is that they make crazy connections pretty easily. And there was one incident where it was something like somebody said something about a hamburger, and the student said, "You can't say that here," or something, something like that.
Well, it really is interesting because a lot of children and a lot of the guests I've had on the show have shared that they really didn't understand that these animals are where meat came from. You know, they really thought that there was like a separate system. You know, one of my recent guests was saying, as a children at a certain point, she got to hold a chicken, and in that moment, she said, "Wait a second, that's the same word as what I eat. Why is that?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah,
strange."
yeah,
You know, and then it was explained to her it is the same. So
right.
another guest was sharing that he really thought that, human beings had, we have muscles and blood and organs and tissue, and that animals had that, but then they also had a section of them called meat. you know so
Oh,
yeah,
fascinating.
so it's amazing, the disconnect. And obviously it's not by happenstance. It's because we're trained, and taught and conditioned into disconnecting between, our food and these animals. But
I gave a medical doctor a tour years ago, and he did not believe me when I told him there was no such thing as a spontaneously, magically milk producing cow, that cows had to be pregnant in order to produce milk. He didn't believe me. A grown man, a doctor, did not believe me.
that's horrifying and appalling. And at the same time, I would say that it wasn't until after I went vegan that I really came to fully comprehend that, which seems so obvious. It's breast milk. It's breast milk
Yeah,
from another species. It's
yeah,
weird that we drink it. And
yeah.
of course, breast milk is produced for a baby.
Right. Yeah.
So just an animal who hasn't had a baby is not going to be naturally producing breast milk. Yeah. So even, I was a total ignoramus when it came to that. Even as a committed vegetarian and then as an ethical vegan, it took a long time for that really to sink in. And now I find just the dairy industry the worst of the worst, just an utter abomination. We purport to have this reverence for motherhood in our society. I was raised Catholic. Oh, the Holy Mother,
Yeah,
like if there's
yeah.
any bond that's sanctified, it's that mother-child bond. And here we have an entire industry that doesn't just incidentally rupture that bond, but is premised on the rupturing
Premise
of
on it.
that bond.
It's premise on it. Yeah.
It's I know I'm preaching to the choir, but boy, when that really sunk in for me, and even today, on a regular basis, I just can't believe that we have whole institutions where they, orchestrate this in a very methodical, engineered, premeditated manner, and we just go about our days. So where did you get your first animals, Kathy? Who were the first creatures that you took into your sanctuary?
Well, the very first, because we also take accept horses, was a tiny little ancient pony named Dino, whose barn in Brooklyn Bourbon Beach Stables, was set on fire by a 15-year-old kid. And all the horses died except for Dino. And he was such a broken little guy. Oh God. Um, until some months later, we took in our first of many blind horses, many blind animals. We've had so many blind animals, but our first blind horse named Buddy, and something about Buddy just captivated him, and in a moment he was transformed. So that he was the very first animal. The next batch of animals came from an animal hoarder. A lot of our animals come from industry. In terms of the majority of our animals, industry and hoarding. And we took in 17 animals who had been locked in a single stall at a 12 by 12 at a notorious hoarder. She'd been hoarding kind of compulsively since the 70s in New York. And there was one massive steer, massive Holstein steer, magnificent cow named Samson, and then goats and mostly sheep. And the most extraordinary animal I have ever met in my entire life came as part of that rescue. And my first book, Where the Blind Horse Sings, tells his never had a professor who taught me as much as that animal taught.
Was this Buddy, or what? Which animal was this?
Oh, Buddy taught me a lot. Buddy the blind horse. The first blind horse named Buddy. Strangely, we've had 4 blind horses named Buddy. Rambo. No, it was Rambo, the sheep. Magnificent sheep who really helped me understand that we need to look at animals. We see animals and we form perception of animals based on this human-centric way of looking at the world, the only way we can look at the world. But he was so brilliant and capable and bonded to me and understood his job. We had to let him free roam because he would have knocked the barn down. He'd been in confinement his whole life. Why would he want to be locked in a stall? So
how big was he, and how old was he?
He was probably he was on the larger side. He wasn't a huge sheep, but he was a Jacob sheep, and they had these amazing horns. His horns were about this big around, and they went back like this, but then came and did a curve in front of his face. He's magnificent looking. And he took on the job. I didn't realize this until he died. I wish I had known it consciously at the time. Like, what do rams do? Rams protect the flock. He took on the job of protecting the flock, but we were all his flock. We were all
so the sheep became the shepherd.
Wow,
and not to keep them safe so they could be killed later.
Oh, he
really to keep them safe.
He used to come to my house when the cows got out. Bah, 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 bah. So many stories. Very silly. Taught us a lot. And he's the
Have you
reason.
ever known?
He's the reason we now have this phenomenon, which has been totally abused, called the Underfoot family. And the Underfoot family are our probably 30 animals who roam free all day long. Including a little pig named Charlotte.
I really am so curious to hear about every single one of these animals. And of course, we're not going to be able to do that. But I'm just curious, for instance, with Rambo, had you ever known a sheep personally before? I imagine you'd encountered them in Virginia in your farm life.
Not that I remember, we had a little sheep who lived in the house, went in and out, who lived in the house and wore diapers, and her name apparently was Babette, but I was like, so
why did she wear diapers?
So she wouldn't poop in the house. I don't know. I don't remember her really because I was literally 2 and 3 years old. So I don't know. I don't know how she died, what happened. I don't know anything. But I just remember pictures of my mom, myself, and Babette lying on the couch in the den. So she was the only sheep, but I didn't really have didn't really have a strong relationships with sheep like I had with other animals. But I tell you, they are breathtaking. They are utterly, it's goats. I always say to people, please don't generalize in the same way that it's foolish to generalize about humans. or dog, because we are all individual, it's equally silly to generalize about any species of farm animal. 10 chicken per individual is 10 children. But there are universal things about all of us that are true. So, for example, we always say goats are the frat boys. Goats never grow out of their territories, right? And not all of them, but a good number of them. Whereas sheep are the soulful ones in on and at the sanctuary. Just walk up and stare into your eyes, and you feel their love. You feel their people sit with the sheep and just are overcome pretty routinely. And they seem to need our love. They seem to need it. They seem to crave it. But you go out into the sheep field and you just get surrounded, get mobbed by these sheep, and they're rubbing all over you. And one's sitting, lying down next to your lap, and one's laying into you. They're breathtaking species.
Aww. Well, that's really just wonderful to hear, just because I haven't spent much time, really hardly any time around sheep. And I feel like just in common parlance, sheep get such a bad rap and everybody, sheepish, but they have there's this stereotype that sheep are dumb and that they're blind followers and, have no, like there's that phrase, sheeple, meaning people who just don't question anything. And I always say, I don't like to hear sheep,
Well, I mean, we could
referred to that way.
Right. We could contradict that with so many stories. I mean, we have lots of extremely independent sheep. Extremely
and it sounds like Rambo really took initiative in terms of just keeping an eye on things and patrolling and taking on that job.
Oh, he did.
Completely bucks the stereotype.
Yeah, he did. And we have lots now. We have Shirley is very independent. She doesn't really she's kind of a loner. Ferguson is would climb in your car and go home with you. Also very, 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 very independent. It doesn't really fit them.
So how did these animals react when you first get them out of that situation that that they're in, whether it's hoarding or animal ag or something? Like, how do they respond when they arrive at your place?
So just like, this is what I would say. You can't answer that question about them. You can only answer it about individuals.
Sure, that makes sense.
Right. So, with these sheep, for instance, we took 40 last year. A year and a half ago, I guess, from a neighbor who had a backyard slaughter operation. And he didn't know what he was doing. We didn't know he existed. Like, we literally, his driveway is 1,500 feet from ours, maybe. And we did not know he existed because it's just his driveway is a long driveway. It is just a dirt road back into the woods. But one day, there was a mother and her infant sheep out in the road. And she was limping badly, and we picked her up, and her hoof was so infected it practically made us gag. So we called the SPCA. They launched an investigation, and it was a very, very, very difficult case. But eventually, 40, when they went in, there were 78 sheep. By the time they were able to pull these guys out, there were only 40 sheep. Don't know if the rest starved to death and were killed. Some died of hoof rot, died of massive infections. And 5 of them didn't make it. They were too far gone. Even with blood transfusions, they were too far gone. One had to have a partial amputation of one of her toes. She's doing fine. Um, but you know, a
And this was
couple,
your neighbor's operation?
yes, a
Wow.
couple of them with to go back to your original question, how they respond. A couple of them within days were tentatively coming up, and now I'd say it's roughly half that are just stupidly friendly, like hilariously so puppy like, but gentle, just deeply affectionate, deeply, deeply. And then some were more reserved, and then a few who are truly shy. So it just depends. And we've learned some animals will appear initially aggressive because they've had to do that to stay safe. And it's an aggression based in fear. So it's all over the map. But for the most part, I would say, if I were forced to generalize, the animals get pretty darn quickly that we're here to care for them, love them, and you kind of watch them go, oh, I don't need to be afraid anymore.
That must be so just moving and just heartwarming when you see them make that shift. Like, oh, I'm no longer in danger. I'm in a safe space. I'm in a sanctuary.
Yeah, it's one of the best moments I've ever experienced. You never get tired of that. I see this little groundhog running all over the place, scaring the goats. This is hilarious. Ah! Uh,
Do you have a lot of wildlife in the area?
tons. Yeah, tons. Fox and tons. Yeah.
Yeah, so how are things going? I mean, it's been 20 years. How is your sanctuary doing? How has it evolved over the years? And how would you say the sanctuary movement in general is doing?
Um, I would say the same thing about us and about the sanctuary movement. We are challenged in a way that we have never been challenged. And it's for a whole host of reasons. And I mean we are challenged financially. One is that there's a philosophy known as effective altruism that has taken root and pulled big funding away from sanctuaries. The true philanthropists who had millions to give away are no longer giving it to sanctuaries. They're giving it to clean meat initiatives, for example, or elsewhere. That's one factor. Hay has gone up exponentially quickly, in part driven by climate change.
Mm.
Um, uh, the number of sanctuaries has exploded. So whereas in New York a few years ago there used to be a handful of sanctuaries. If you drew a circle with 3 hours in any direction from us, you'd probably find 30 sanctuaries. So, I mean, they're literally probably 1,000, and the donor in the ballparkish,
Yeah.
and the donor base has not kept pace. The donor dollars have not grown at the rate that sanctuaries grow, and it's the dip in donations since COVID, right? And because you've also got donor fatigue, like that's a very real phenomenon, um, has been so concerning that we surveyed sanctuaries around the country. And we surveyed 45 sanctuaries. We sent out 90. We got about back half of the surveys. And all but two said they had seen a dramatic drop in giving. All but one said they'd seen a dramatic increase in costs. And I think it was 1 in 3 are worried about their survival.
Wow.
Yep. So it is a really, really, really very unusually tough time. Very tough time. And sorry, you were going to ask something, Chrissy?
I was just trying to put together the connection between the drop in donations around that came with COVID, the COVID era. What is it? Is it just that people were out of work and people's income in general dropped, or was there another connection that I'm missing?
I don't know. I mean, I think from a practical point of view, like we and I think we're other sanctuaries are much like this. We had to close. We had a bed and breakfast. We had to close it down. We
Right.
relying on tours income. We had to close it down. Close
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
down. You know,
Right.
we rely on special events income. Couldn't have any.
Okay, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Right. So it's all
Yeah.
those things. We lost a year and a half. We lost a third of our income for a year and a half. And then when we opened our bed and breakfast back up, we found that people didn't want to share bathrooms. It's just quote. And so, that's just one example of the
Interesting. Okay, that
heavy,
makes
heavy
a lot of sense.
impact
Yeah.
of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so how are you managing? I mean, how has it been?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really very difficult. The fundraising is relentless. And I was talking to a friend who runs another sanctuary recently, and she said, nothing is working. Nothing that I've been able to rely on
Mhm.
is working. And I think it's a whole, there's so much noise on social media and there is so much noise in our heads. And it's it's a phenomenon. We did a piece on CBS, I think it was CBS, talking about the drop in donations to sanctuaries across the country. And of course, I think the piece led with the fact that there's a significant drop in giving to nonprofits across sectors, not just to animal sanctuaries. And in
Mhm.
fact, I don't want to name it. I don't want to name the organization, but I was speaking with a friend who runs a local radio station who told me about how one of the most beloved and well-established nonprofits in our region is shutting down. So
Wow.
it's 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 a tough time.
Right. Right. And I would imagine that that's such a tough balance to keep between the administrative aspects and the fundraising and, actually working with, the animals who, of course, are the reason you went into this line of business in the first place. And then the education, the things that really matter, and then the things that are required to keep you afloat. Hopefully, you're building a solid donor base and a solid vegan base in the New York public schools, I would think, with this new program that you're bringing. Do you think
Yeah,
that will ultimately bear some fruit?
yeah, I think it will. And we do have a solid donor base. It's just that when your hay bill goes from $60,000 to $100,000 like that,
That's
that's not
amazing. And what is the reason for that price spike?
I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that part of it is just basic supply and demand. When you have a really, really, really wet hay growing is very needs certain conditions, and it needs, most importantly, a long enough stretch of dry weather to dry out completely before it can be baled into those square bales or sometimes round bales.
Hmm.
Um, and if you don't get that stretch of weather, you can lose a whole cutting of hay. So instead of needing to cut 3 times a year, you might only be able to cut two, or instead of, in the worst case scenario, you'd only be able to cut one once a season. So
Oh,
there,
wow. So it's kind of all or nothing. Like you lose that
well, no,
whole
I mean, weather is different all over the place, right?
sure.
But here is, but I have, even though I've not talked with the suppliers, my suspicion is that it's because of the weather.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we've
And
had unusually wet summers, which is when hay grows.
right, right. So
Grass.
is your sector, are you continuing to acquire land or how are you situated in your spot now? I know you
We're,
mentioned something about possibly finding a new location.
we're looking to move. We have begun our search. Um, we're in a valley. We're in a valley, and we have so we're in a valley. Rain comes down from both sides, and with increased flooding and more increased rain and rain coming down in more violent sunbursts. We've had horrible flooding, terrible erosion. We've lost a tremendous amount of our trees, and we've lost a tremendous amount of our topsoil. Like our
Oh,
hilly pastures are becoming rock. So for the safety of, we don't want to get to the point where it is a true life-threatening emergency. We've already had 3 instances of having to relocate animals because the pond overflowed its banks and was out in the road and then
oh boy.
coming for the barns. Our main barn, we have a whole mess of barns, but our main barn, uh with every heavy rain, because there's so few trees now to absorb the water, and so little topsoil. Our barn floods pretty routinely.
Wow. So what are you looking for and how's the search going?
Well, the search is going great. We found a couple interesting properties. We want to stay in this area. We've got a good team, super great team of people. Would love to stay in this area. We haven't found the right uh thing quite yet. We had our eye on a place in Gardner, but it was a nonprofit owns the development rights, which essentially means that they get to dictate what you can and can't build. And we went to them. We went to their board and told them what our needs were, and they basically wouldn't budge. They told us we could have 3 run-ins, which is a shelter, and we need probably 20.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah. So it's out there. We'll keep looking.
Yeah, yeah. What's your timeline? I mean, I imagine it's not easy to move a whole operation to a new spot.
It will not be easy, but a number of sanctuaries have already done it. Like there are several sanctuaries that left the West Coast because of fire. There is a sanctuary in Florida that wants to relocate because of hurricanes. So it has been done.
Yeah.
Um, and we're not moving across the country. So,
Right.
we can
Right.
move, and there are animals across the country. We can move a couple hundred animals, 30 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, what do your days look like? Is there a regular day for you or is it just different every day depending on what responsibilities you've
I
got?
think it's different every day. Um, uh, thank goodness. It's different every day.
How
I
much time do you get to spend with the animals?
Oh, not enough. Not nearly enough, which is why I do a custom tour called Break All the Rules. And people will request a tour with me. So I did an amazing tour with Teachers College out of New York last weekend. And it just reminded me, like we were all in tears, right? A
Mhm.
lot of the time. It just reminded me of how I can't get too far away from that. That's where I ground myself, if I'm just raising money, or I'm just writing, or I'm just speaking, which I don't do as much these days since COVID, then I can it can get not that it was all rewarding, but I need to be down here every day and sit with those sheep.
Right, doing those two things that brought you to this world in the first place, the
100%.
teaching and the animals. Yeah, so right
100%.
down there in the
Yeah.
trenches, I imagine is really powerful. Wow. So what I've just a couple more questions for you, even though I would love to ask about every specific animal, but that would be impossible, of course. But what's the turnover like? How many animals do you tend to have coming in, and I assume they stay there for their lives, for their
They do.
natural lives.
They do. It's hard to say. When you're a young sanctuary and you've got lots of space to fill, you can participate in the big rescues. But then you fill up, and you can only take the one here, or you can only take the eight.
Yeah.
Well, you can take the 8 chickens, or you can take the one horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't, in our early years, we did a rescue of 22 horses. We did a rescue of 400 chickens. You can't do that once you're at capacity. So, I mean, right now, we took in those 40 sheep. We were foolish to do that. It taxed us. We're madly in love with him. Glad you did. But it was so hard. We took them all because the SPCA was not going to investigate unless we were willing to take however many there were, and we at the time didn't know how many.
Mm.
So we've now been through a phase where we've had a lot of losses because we've been open for 23 years. And so we've got the 35-year-old horses, and we've got the 20-year-old cow, and we've got the 14-year-old pigs. So there's that. And then there's that to deal with, because that grief is not everybody can take that. Not you have to get good at saying goodbye.
Right.
You fall in love. You fall in love. You fall in love, and then you say goodbye. And then you fall in
Right.
love, and then you say goodbye. That is, if you can't build that muscle that loves them fully, but then is able to let them go when their quality of life is gone, and then get kind of back to center to be here for all the others and for your teammates, right? Then this work is not for you, because that's an
Oh
inevitable.
boy. It sounds very, very Buddhist in its messaging, that idea of being fully present and in the moment, and yet
It has
not
to be.
getting
It has
so
to be.
attached that you keep clinging, even though impermanence is all around you. What would you say the fundamental truth is that you've learned from these animals?
Oh, that absolutely, that in the ways that matter, the ways that truly matter, we're all the same. We are all the same. Doesn't matter race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, social class, nationality, ethnicity, or species. We are all the same. Everybody wants love. We are all individuals. Oh my God. The stories I've been telling you about, you just spend 5 minutes with the chickens and you see, there's the one who's talk, and shut up, talk, what are you doing? What are you? And then there's the retreat, the retreats, and then there's the aggressive one, and then so individual. Every animal wants her life as much as I want mine. You can't name an emotion we have that they don't. And pain and suffering feel the same no matter our species. So that is what they taught us unequivocally, that in the ways that matter, we are the same. And so if that's true, you really let that in. And how's that in life? in your choices.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's beautifully put. And I think the obvious answer that's coming to me is it affects everything. It affects everything once we let that in. Yeah, that changes the whole paradigm of the planet and the way we walk around. Wow. Well, Kathy, what's the best way people can help?
Honestly, I would say this for us and for every sanctuary. There's no sanctuary that's rolling in money right now that I know of. I mean, sanctuaries need financial support. Period. The end. We've got campaigns going on. We've got a little Mother's Day campaign. We've got, people can just log on to our website or any of our social media and just, make a gift, sponsor an animal that. And if you're out of our region and if there's a sanctuary that you have an affinity for, you just, as long as it's a good one, we can all use a little help.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we'll certainly include all the information in the show notes. And I think, the education and teaching piece that you all focus on just is such an integral piece, because it means that, okay, the gifts won't be ending with the lives of these animals who you've rescued. The gifts will be perpetuating because you're planting the seeds of awareness, and people are truly coming to understand, that truth that we all are the same in the ways that matter.
Yeah.
All right, Kathy. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope to be back to visit the sanctuary in the not too distant future. But really appreciate your time and everything that you're doing for animals and for humans, and in the public schools. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I love the fact that that's getting injected into their school system. That's an injection that's really necessary, I would say.
Thanks, Chrissy. It's been a pleasure.
So,
let me know.
well,
Reach out if you are going to come.
I will. I most definitely will. And one final question that I like to pose to all my guests: is there a single word that for you sums up what being vegan is all about?
Love. Love.
No hesitation there. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I can feel it. I can feel it from you just over the over the virtual airwaves, and just the way you talk about these animals and the work that you do. Yeah, I can feel the love in action through everything you're doing. So thank you for that. And we close every episode of the Vegan Posse by taking 30 seconds of silence for all of the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So, Kathy, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Posse. See you next time. Until then, stay strong and stay true.